All through life, we're guided. We're guided on which ways to go. When a lot of people don't always believe in that, but there's little voices in us that tell us a lot of things if we only just listen. So today we have a really great voice that's going to be telling us of some of the things that everybody needs to do because you never know what tomorrow will bring. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
I'm good, Glenda. I'm good.
Today we have a phenomenal episode that's going to be happening in any moment because we have a really great speaker who's coming on to talk to us about some of the really important things that people don't look at it as a necessity, but I certainly do.
Yeah. And I've been lucky enough to get to know this wonderful lady in a pretty personal way. We met at Forbes like a year and a half ago, and I've watched her grow tremendously into a even more powerful speaker, author, you name it. This gal does a lot of things, and there's so much here that I could put down, but I would be reading through the end of the show. So, this lady is an author. She's an entrepreneur. She is the Will Fairy. And she has a quote that I absolutely loved. And she is empowering diverse leaders for positive change through legacy, engagement, and inclusion. And I think that's one of the most powerful statements I've ever heard. And I want to introduce Jo Welch today. She's our beautiful Will Fairy that's coming on to give us great advice, which I need. And Jo, I've known you for about a year and a half, maybe a little longer, and I'm so impressed by how far both of us have come. But you in particular, you've really. I remember you signed at one of the baseball games because you signed the national anthem. I've seen you in Lion King makeup.
You have. Did you get to see Ursula? I was also Ursula.
I think I did get to see Ursula, but like I said, I could just keep on reading for days at what you've accomplished, but I think it would be a lot more fun if you start us at the beginning and tell us about this fabulous transition that you are still in the middle of.
Absolutely. I want to thank you both, Glenda and Nicole. You're correct. The connection started with Forbes Riley and the services, the community being built there. And, and I think that especially every entrepreneur, we're out there on our own trying to make things happen for ourselves. We're stretching the dollar, we're stretching our time, and sometimes trying to stretch our brain to wrap around it. And so finding not only a great mentor, someone who's able to teach, skill sets, but also finding a great community who's there to not only see the beginning, which is where I was when I met you, but also be able to look back and go like, whoa, okay, look at how you're taking these tools and making them your own. And I feel the same about both of you, because that's how I met you and saw, what was I getting myself into. With that, my name is Jo Welch, and I'm known as the beneficiary's best friend because I want to get people to finish your will now.
I agree.
Right. And especially through the lens of entrepreneurship, small business, and celebrity, what happens, we're so busy building the legacy, the dream. We're so focused on the what's happening tomorrow that we forget to look even a little bit beyond that and say, God forbid something were to happen, especially that we have so many, plates on the stick, how they have that guy who's going, no, running around, or strings or balls in the air, or however you see your life. We have a lot going on. And with that, such a robust ecosystem, our relationship being a great example of that if God forbid something were to happen, and there is a truth behind it, that we know we only have our one life here. So it's not a, let's see what happens. It's at that time, how do we make sure that the people that we leave behind, the ones we want to enjoy the legacy, right? Whether it's money or ideas, books, whatever it is, children, family, property, whatever that is for you, how do we make sure that when that time comes, one, this might be weird, but they have time to grieve, right? That they have the space to just feel the feelings of loss, because regardless if it anticipated or not, there's still feelings about it. And then the other side, that it doesn't become a full job, because now you are the Inspector Gadget of your family, trying to open every folder, every, drawer, and trying to find where that legacy might lie in the nooks and crannies. So with that, when I was growing up, I thought that I didn't have value, that I certainly didn't have wealth. I'm a first generation daughter of immigrant parents from Colombia. They raised me with a lot of love, but they took their branch off of their family tree. They brought it here to the United States, and I am the first of those branches that is growing from this new tree. So wealth also extends to that family richness, the stories, the photos. But I didn't think I had all of that, because I was alone and I just thought I was on my own. And I couldn't even fathom being in one of those big offices with all the dark wood, whether reading a will and someone gives me a boat or a horse or something, right? Like, it just felt inconceivable. But at its core, it's just a blueprint. And so that's my mission. My mission is to get that blueprint in everyone's hands. I'm not the will attorney. I'm the will fairy. That's the name of my company. And so with that, that's what I'm doing that's what we're going to talk about today.
And you brought up an amazing point when you talk about grieving, because and making it easy for people. Because when my mom got sick in 2012, before she even went to the doctor, she says, no, she says, I'm going to an attorney and I'm going to get everything in place. And so I went with her, and she did her will, she did her trust, she did because I think she even knew then what was going on. She had breast cancer, but literally she would not go to a doctor before she had her will in place. She was a very, very smart woman. And I hate to say it, she made it easy for me because it was all laid out.
And you just said an interesting thing. I hate to say it. The truth is that this is what we do this for every other aspect of our lives. We pack the lunches for our kids. We make sure that our partners has that little note, or, like, hey, that envelope is sitting at the door so that you can grab that on the way out. Like, this is normal planning. This is what it is to run a business, right? Calling the client and saying, hey, I know that we have a meeting coming up, or a text or something. Like, this is not, we're not doing something out of the norm. And that's what's behind this mission. Is all this is looking at the will through a different lens. It's saying that it's a living document, right? And even saying that is such a different, more powerful way to look at it.
And you know what? I've lived through this too, and I had this, many years ago when my mother passed away. My father had passed away many years before that, and my mother left 2 dependents. And with that, there was a lot of detail that had to be done, and which most of it wasn't done until her passing, which came onto my shoulders. And that's why, in my own way, I try to explain to people, especially when you have special needs children in your family, and that so much needs to be set up, because otherwise it falls on all the other family members in the household. And it's so difficult. This is talking from somebody who's living the life now of caring for my siblings, and doing some of the job that should have been done ahead of time. Because when you also have your own family to deal with, and then on top of it, you're taking on a full responsibility of somebody else's life, it becomes an overpowering thing. And just like you talked about, how important it is, because here's the thing of people need to know that it's not just the will, it's also the other things, the power of attorneys that needs to be completed as well. So if somebody, God forbid, gets into an accident and they're on a respirator and they don't want to be left on a respirator for years on end, these are your last wishes. And this is part of life. Death is part of life. Whether you believe you carry forward after that or not, that's not what we're saying. We're saying is if you're family enough, you love them to look after them now and forever. Because this is really what helps all of us move forward in life, is to make sure documents are in place so that your wishes are now listened to, and then we can do with whatever you want to be done, your family can carry it forward.
Absolutely. And when we look through the lens of the things we learn as entrepreneurs, and so those of you out here who are listening, you may be, a small business owner or a celebrity or an entrepreneur. You might have a business. You might be doing something, a side hustle, whatever that is. There are some things we hear, like one is how we do anything is how we do everything. So when it comes to the will, if we're putting that off, then it's likely that there's some other frameworks that we're not necessarily looking at. And so we have to look behind what is going on. That's why I'm very adamant that I'm the will fairy and not the will attorney. I'm not going to give any legal advice. So everybody say that to yourselves right now. Joe and the team will not give legal advice. And the reason is that one, I'm not an attorney, so I have no authority to do so. What I'm focused on is you. This is all about you. And it's really about taking you through. It's about mindset, accountability, and sometimes, not always, and this isn't the only way I do things, but sometimes we just want someone to tell us what to do. Like today, don't let me discover the 17 steps to do X, Y, and Z. Just tell me what I should focus on so that I can get that piece done. I had a meeting today with my team because what I'm excited about and what you guys see here is no excuses, finish your will now. Is in fact, and just so you know, food delivery keeps coming to my door to drop off groceries. So that is the sound you're hearing. Know that there is protein on my porch that hopefully my husband will be getting very soon. But that's a really great example. I'll use that as a tangent that a lot of the things that we have today are behind a digital wall. So let's just use that as the example. If that doesn't convince you, I've got more. Like, who's got those passwords? How are you going to cancel the fee for your Instacart or we're all business women. So do you have a CRM? Do you have a network? Are there people who rely on you to do certain things? Like we're thinking only about assets. And that's where people get lost and confused. They think I don't have anything, meaning they can't count $1 million in a pile or whatever it is. They don't have jewelry. They don't have wealth in that way. And then the conversation stops. Right? They don't explore it further because, and this is my secret, I do have some features in my computer, just so you guys can enjoy this, that if I do movement, it's going to give you a thumbs up. So I have not figured out how to get that taken care of. However, when we think of things only in terms of monetary wealth, what we're missing is all of the other wealth streams that we have that are about emotional support. Are you somebody's caregiver? Are you somebody's accountability partner? You guys are partners in this podcast? God forbid something were to happen. Have we taken the moment to look at what does that structure look like? If it needs to separate, what would that look like? And people, it's not without the idea that this can be difficult. It is emotional. It can be emotional. It may be that we're unclear about certain things, but the reality is the power of attorney, the guardianship, the durable power of attorney, that all affects before you pass. So God forbid you are sick, right? This isn't only about death. What if you're sick? Who's making those decisions? And keep in mind, whether you like it or not, the ER is built to save your life. This is not a nuanced space unless you have documents. Also, the law is built for standardization of expectations. It will go to your next of kin or however it's written in your state. So if you don't live near your family or you're estranged from your family or you have a real beef with your family, those may be the people that are left holding the decision making in the long run. And that's just a really great point to say, like, oh, right, at its core, I can make sure that my partner, my spouse, if you're in the LGBTQ community, you're the person that means the most to you. If you don't have a partner or children, you might have a best friend or a business partner that is that person. And we don't think about that because you're just like, oh, it'll work out because in your day-to-day life, it'll work out. But the reality is that everything's behind it digitally. Everything is inside your mind and everything is in that junk drawer without any explanation.
And, it's very easy to have what you want done and put into writing. Nowadays, you don't even need to get to a lawyer physically at the beginning. You can make a phone call and you can have everything drafted up before you even have to step out. Yes, you are going to need a will, has to be witnessed and sworn, but all the work can be done instead. So, with a phone call.
You have absolutely. And it is a different way to look at things. People and choosing your experts is a big passion of mine. Sometimes you might have a family member who you want to do the nuts and bolts of it. It might be that you find someone in your local community, but there are resources. I know that I use one that I'm able to do a lot of my legal stuff on the phone, and it handles all of that. And you can go to your bank and get the notary. And and part of my system is I'm also working on getting notaries in every single state, or getting someone who has that national license, because it can be done. The pandemic has really shifted us into that world where we can get things done even from the comfort of your own home, and especially if you just need to get it done and you want to do it in your jammies and comfortable blanket. It's about bringing it to you, and how do we get it done? That's what it is. Finish your will now.
And I know a will is very, very important, but can you speak to how important a trust is also? So as you don't have to go to probate to get permission?
Well, what I will say is this: a lot of my effort right now is very focused on getting a document into people's hands. So that's what my interest is to even get a basic will done. What I will say beyond that, and again, this goes back to how important experts are, is that there are people, the trust is so important for a lot of families because of things like tax deferment, special needs family, how you structure your business, how you looking at your finances. Like, there's so many reasons that a trust is a valid and important piece of it. And so we would leave it I would want a person who focuses on trusts to talk about the mechanics and what that savings is. But absolutely, there's a lot we can see that there's so many ways that we can handle our financial life, and that it's about the financial life. How are we manifesting it? But what I will say is that some people are holding off on all things, not getting a will done because they think they need to get the trust first. What I'm recommending is get the basic will done and then work on the trust so that you're not unprotected. The other thing, right? The other thing that's important is, where is your digital information? Like the will, and going back to like the idea of probate and all that, what the will does is it gives authority to people to do certain things. Now, mind you, I will say that the systems out there are not perfect. Having one will and a death certificate is not going to be the, go through every gate without issue that we would hope and wish that it was. However, it is the one that gets us the furthest. It does move some things out of the realm of probate, which is about depending on the state, it's about going to court and having to have a judge decide on X or Y and how things are read. But that it starts with a will. The trust is a part of it. There's a lot of different things, including businesses. That's its own legal system, right? How someone separates a business doesn't necessarily show up in the will, but the will determine how that gets manifested in the family and what's happening there. So like, there's a lot of pieces. Again, not a will attorney, but aware enough to say, let's pause and think about the questions that may come from this that need to be addressed, that, I don't know the answer to. But I'll bet you I can help you. In fact, I know I can help you find an attorney, help you find a law firm. And then if you're feeling like there's a lot of questions, I can even work with you to figure out how to ask some of those questions. So it's not, again, where's the direction we're going in? What are the questions we're really looking to answer?
And I think that's some of the problem is people are so, they have no idea where to start. What do I do? Where do I start? They don't know the questions to ask. So they just put it off, and I know that's daunting, but the importance of this should exceed every thought like that.
But we also have to take it to the parameters of entrepreneurship and business and celebrity and all that, that a confused mind does nothing, right? Like we've heard these so many times. And I'm saying that all of this applies. You know, if you're confused, what comes first? Whether it's, do I get a trust first? What am I doing here? Where do I go? How much does this cost? Or I just spoke to someone who said, I have so much debt that I don't need to even get a will. And so in her mind, she had a math equation. Too much debt negates a will, versus the will has a lot to do with your debt, but it's more indicating, at least in one, this is my take on it, right? You're going to put everything into one place so that when the person who takes over to settle your assets, to settle all the things, has the power to, knows where to find everything, and then is also able to speak to each of those systems to say, what is it that you need for me to terminate this relationship? Because it's not about the people inheriting money. It's not about the executor themselves. Like they don't have a legal responsibility in that, except to make sure that the paperwork is done correctly. Without a will, without assigning somebody, then people are just gonna, it's a free-for-all.
Yeah. What it does is it gives somebody the legal entitlement to look after your affairs. And
I was just gonna add, a lot of people assume that that means that they're responsible, that the person executor is responsible.
okay, so you're not physically responsible for that, but you are responsible as an executor. If you've been named as an executor in a will, you are responsible to act according to the stipulations of an executor, which means you have to carry out the person's their last wishes according to the document that they sign. Now, what we don't need to realize is we don't need to understand all of that, but we do need to go to an attorney. And here's the thing of someone, so, and I hear this as well, is, well, I don't know who does wills. If you go to any attorney, well, but I also live in Canada too, right? So if you go, though, if you go to any type of an attorney and you say to that attorney, I need somebody who can make a will, then it's very easy. They can also direct you. So don't let it be something that stops you from making a will, because even an accountant can guide you. You know, another lawyer who doesn't handle wills can guide you. It's not the end point. Really what it is, it's the starting point.
Right. And we're also talking about learning, right? So when we're looking at a whole human and what's going on, there's Vygotsky is a guy who wrote about like the process of learning. And this is my take on it, that sometimes these things that we don't understand suddenly have all the power. I don't know where to get started. I don't know how to do a will. But if you really thought about it and said, well, what is a will? Like you start asking questions and you're like, I don't even know what a will is. Oh, it's a contract. It's it's a legal document. And you're like, oh, well, where would I find that information? Oh, do lawyers travel in networks? Things like that. Or do I have a friend who deals with wills or legal issues? Or, that when it's no questions, just I'm not going to do it because it's too much, then the will has all the power. I have a friend who technology had all the power, so they would just put their hands up at their computer. But once we start asking questions, what we're doing is we're bringing that knowledge closer to ourselves. And then it can be that we're the ones regulating the discussion. Yeah. Like, oh, I know that it talks about finances, but I don't know what to do. I'll bet the lawyer has lots of experience knowing how to deal, and not that they'll address it because it's not one-stop shop, but that they will at least point out the other experts that might be able to help. And you know what? If the lawyer can't, it's okay. A lot of people have done this before. And so that's where the will fairy and being the beneficiary's best friend is, that I'm looking out for your next generation. And I'm looking out for you, because if your parents are still alive, you are the beneficiary. And in Nicole's world, like, what a blessing that your mom saw it as a living document that took that moment, right? And made it easy for you, because that's what it should be. It doesn't have to be an uphill battle. And the battles are still built in. Like, I'm sure even with all that information, you still had fights with certain companies and you had to take care of certain things, or maybe there wasn't a full answer and you couldn't, go back to her and ask her, where is this, right? Like, as much as your heart wished that you could. But
You
what
can't.
I know, and what I also extend this to, and the way I approach it is, when you're working with me, we're thinking about your ecosystem, the people who you love and take care of. You're thinking about writing letters on your behalf of you. What would you want to say to them so that when that time comes, they feel your love, they know what's going on. The roadmap to finding all the little pieces. I have a dear friend who talked about, an older couple finally did their will in their late 80s.
Ooh.
But they lived beyond that. They lived for several more years beyond that. But that there was also inherent in their culture and in their belief system that you can't trust anybody. So to find the will, they had to do a scavenger. They were going through books and trying to figure out where this was stored. But there was no blueprint. There was nothing. So they had a will. They knew there was a will, but they had to find the original. And so again, there's a lot of this, whether it's mysticism, it's faith-based, it's stories from the family, ideas that if you talk about something, you're going to be bringing bad luck. There's a lot of that built in. And I got to say, we have to respect it. That we have to say, we're going to come to this conversation knowing that for some folks, it's going to be overcoming way more than just documentation, or wanting to have faced their situation. And that has to be done with respect. Generation to generation, we cannot begin to unpack how somebody sees death from when they were born almost 100 years ago.
Right.
Right? When they were born 50 years ago, when they were born 30 years ago. Like, these are major shifts. And so I think you're getting also a little sense of how I speak a lot of languages. I speak English, Spanish, American Sign Language. I also speak baby boomer. I speak millennial. I speak Gen Z, and because we really have to find out how people are talking about it. Where is their belief system coming from? And again, that's what makes me the will fairy. I'm focused on you trying to get through to the other side, which is getting the will done. Whether it doesn't matter how, right? If you get your own attorney, if you've got something working, if you're doing it with me, it doesn't matter. I'm currently working on getting a website. It's not up yet, but it will be that people who get their wills done, regardless of how they get it done, they're just going to be able to put a mark in there. And so we're going to keep a tally of new wills, because the statistics are frightening. 1 out of 4 Americans has a will. That means 25% have the will, or here's the worst number, right? Same math, 75% don't.
Yeah,
And for me, as a first generation Latina, the numbers get worse. Marginalized, women of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, it goes down to 1 in 10. 90% of those communities don't have anything in place. We could go on for days talking about the why. Why is that? Lack of information. Maybe there's an issue around poverty. How do we find, education? But the reality is that we need to get this message out. We need to make sure that our friends, if we're coaches, if you're a coach out there, if you're a celebrity, if you're with people that are doing work, right, and working hard, I feel like it's part of our accountability to them to say, hey, I see that you're working so hard. You have the business card, you have the agent, you have the CRM. Do you have your will in place? Oh, I'm too young for that. I don't have anything, right? Like, I don't have anything to give. It's not about that. It is a blueprint. It is a blueprint that says, this is my favorite question as of late. Who's going to clear your browser history? Your mom? Is that for some people, like, that's like, wait, what? Like, if that's your next of kin, if people are coming in, now it's a group effort. Everyone's trying to help figure out your passwords and all that, and they're in your computer. Who's clearing your browser history? Who's reaching out to your people, your fans, your clients? Who's opening the drawer with that massive key ring that has all the keys of everywhere you've ever lived? And now they have to go into every lockbox or thing and wonder what it is.
Yeah. Those are things people don't think about,
For me, it's very stark in that when I said that my parents took a branch off of their family tree, if you look at that family tree as a fundamental level of wealth, in that is your family. And for a lot of bigger families or longer standing families, you have people who can help babysit, people who drive you somewhere or loan you the car or dress you up for that interview, right? Like all that inherent stuff. For me, we came over here and planted a new tree. So, it's out of my radar to some extent, but that's still wealth. That's still valuable. If you are that for somebody else, are you the person who's bringing the warm meal to the person at the corner, the older person who doesn't get out? But the other side of it too is if you're working hard to earn money with good ethics and morals, of course, because that's what I know that this whole audience is coming from, that standpoint. We're working hard in good faith. We're earning not just a living, but the goal is to be in a place of like financial safety. Is it just for you? Is it meant to just disappear? No, we're doing it because we want the next generation to benefit the way we did, right? Or is your parent at that moment where you're the one who's going to inherit whatever is left, however, not whatever's left, however it's left. I have a dear friend, 2 parents who've passed with a will. It's been 3 years settling their estate. It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And we don't think about that. Like, is that how you want to spend those next couple years? That's your focus.
So, Joe, let's take it now from, we all know that we all should know how important a will is, your last decisions to make sure that the right people inherit what has been left, that your kids or grandkids or whoever is looked after, whatever part of your family needs to, or who shouldn't be left. If you're feeling that way, and there's a lot of problems in families, and you don't want Aunt Sue to get that part, you need to be putting all this in writing. But let's go a step before all of this. We need to write that will. And right now it's circulating in your head of what you need. What would be, before they make that grab for the phone to pick up and call and ask, what are some of the things that they can do to start preparing to write for their will?
Absolutely. Well, one, you're going to go to joewelch.com because I'm going to send you my ebook called Who Gets Your Cheese? And it's going to give you some of those exact tips. But I'll be more specific here that what we're doing is we're writing, I do a keynote, which is called, The Legacy Effect, the most important book you'll ever write. And this is your story. It's your book. A lot of us in the entrepreneurial space, we're writing books because we know that that's a great way to share our story. We tend to look back, right, and think about all of those things. But really, this will is like that as well. We're looking at where we've come from and where we're going. The things we're looking at are, who are we? Where do we live? Like, it's pragmatics for the will. Like, oh, I live in this address. But if you have previous marriages or you have relationships that were very long and existed in the same state you were in another state, in another country, that's all relevant because there are laws that are tied to each of those. What are those laws? I don't know. But I have ways to be able to help you find the right person to help you deal with if it's international, if it's happening from state to state. That also goes with your relationships. Maybe you only will have one marriage. Maybe you've had a few marriages. Maybe you have children and you're now a blended family. I'll also say for the LGBT community or people who are changing their name for whatever reason, there's a lot of also who's going to be the determiner of not only your legacy, but what names are you under? How has someone met you? Do they necessarily know some of those? And that includes domestic violence as well. We have folks who are, leaving their very, situations that are not healthy. And they also need to find a way to not only leave their legacy, but also be safe. And so all of this intricacy just in ourselves, that's the you part of it. It's about you. Like, oh, yeah. Right. Okay, I do this and I was married and this is my home. Then there's the them part of it. Who are you connected to? Right? Children. And we can look at it through the lens of, who would inherit or not, like you pointed out, not inherit. I have a dear friend who is absolutely estranged from her father, but in his final days took on the guardianship because she made the decision that it would be easier to be in charge instead of having other people making assumptions about what a father-daughter relationship looks like. And so she was able to do it with due diligence and treat, he got absolute fair treatment to the end, but there's no love there. And that is a reality. There are some people who are, there's no love there. They didn't raise you. They didn't raise you right, whatever it is. And you have ways to write that in. I do not want this person making any decisions for me.
Mm.
Right? Like
Right.
that's something as simple as that. Or you might have a legacy, you know, and some people base it on like who has children, who does not, how do you want it divided? You know, this is one of the biggest places where people lose their families because there's an assumption about what the estate is going to look like or do instead of expectations on how the process is going to look. And a lot of people keep wills secret. You don't have to keep it a secret. You can just tell only the executor and the guardian what to, you know, what's where things are and what's happening. Or you can, I recommend having that bigger conversation because it's being prepared, right? Even if it's top level vague, it's still being prepared. Hey, you know, the college fund is where we have that money, those monies set up. You know, we have multiple trusts set up for the family. Here are the banks, and that's all it is every tax season, right? We're 6 months out from tax season. Every tax season, you're already doing a lot of the legwork. So now we're talking about assets and debts. Easy peasy. You're already doing it. You're doing it in March for your K1. You're doing it in April for your personal. You are seeing this information. This is not reinvention, right? It's just saying, oh, right. Again, that object regulation. I can't do the will. Oh, wait. If I have this list of stuff I'm already accounting for in my taxes, could I just put that into another spreadsheet and keep that information and maintain it and put it somewhere safe so that the person who would be dealing with my items knows where to find it? Right? So we talked about you, we talked about them, we talked about what we have and what we owe, because that's also the car loan and the mortgage, you know. And do you own random things that maybe someone wouldn't know about? A house in the Bahamas, you know, a jet ski, you know. I had someone say, like, what key is this? And it was for a Caterpillar, like dirt extractor or
Oh
something.
my
And
gosh.
but the only way she could figure it out, but she didn't know where it was. So maybe there's a garage somewhere where, you know what I mean? It's like things like
Yeah,
that. I
it's
think, and we've watched enough storage wars to know that people do not know where their stuff is. Right?
True.
That show where everyone's bidding on it and then they open up and that's the stuff we're protecting. Stuff that someone else bought for $1,000 so they could be like, whatever, you know. The other is being clear about what those expectations are. That is probably one of my biggest takeaways from talking to different people is, you know, and I will cite Nicole's situation that you knew where everything was. It wasn't ambiguous. While the system still can get you and you can get caught up in X, Y, and Z, you at least knew where you were starting. And that was a big part of, I've seen success in those places, but usually not having a will or being very opaque and not just having a conversation with someone. It
Yeah.
creates more problems than is worth.
Yeah.
So that's just a few ways for us to wrap our brain around all of this. You know your address, you know who your children are, you know, you have former spouses. Now, you might have an emotional thing where you're like, I don't want to deal with that side of my life. And that that's okay. But then you need to ask the attorney. And I'm always going to push towards getting an expert. You can ask the attorney, what do I do about that? If there was danger involved, or if you just didn't want to be a part of it. And some of it is just simply to check boxes to make sure that things are done correctly.
Wow.
My last little piece is if you have a previous existing will from a time in your life, if someone still has it and there's no will to replace it, that is a binding contract.
yeah.
Wow. So you have to be very cautious with, 20 years ago, if you can even remember that far back, someone having something. And yeah. And Joe, I'm guessing you have to be licensed in many states other than just your own that you reside in. How many states are you licensed in to where you can help people?
So here's the beautiful thing. I am your coach. I am your accountability person. I am your will fairy. I do not want your account numbers. I do not want to know how many children you have, known and otherwise. I don't need any of that information, because what I'm doing is the will attorney is going to give you paperwork. You're going to, so you were saying before making the call, I'd say make the call, because you still need to say, okay, I can afford this. I'm going to go forward. Like, make the call and get the nuts and bolts out of the way. Very often, and with some of the services I do have access to, you start with a what is it called? A worksheet where you're just filling things out. So it's going to get you on track. And once you're on track, you're going to send it back to them and then have that conversation about, what does this mean? What about this? What, you're going to go line by line and say, oh, I was married in a previous, I do have a previous will, all that kind of stuff with them. But they're the ones doing all the legal work. I am not handling your paperwork. I'm not typing anything up. Like, it's all about you and your time sitting down, getting into a place of safety and focus and saying, today, we're going to say, what did your attorney ask of you? What stage are you in this? Where are your blocks? What's working well for you? And that everything is in support of that. Okay, great. Oh, my spouse is having, oh, great. Let's meet with a spouse. I'm all about the family and the conversation, having fun and making, and that's a weird thing to say, like, to have fun. Yes, because we're telling our story. We're telling our family the story that we've lived, the story that we're leaving behind. And today's story might be different in 6 months. I know mine will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. So what ways can people, like I said, start with? You're saying of telling your stories. Do you have them at all also writing things down so they can leave to their families, and things like that? Or even, I know some people that have left videos and telling their stories in some other ways of not just the actual will, but it's part of sharing what they believe that they want their children to know.
Absolutely. And I'll let you know that I have an event coming up as well as the book. So on November 14th, with all things going well, November 14th is going to be that launch date. So I definitely would love for people to support me and find out and thumb through it, read the stories, because even if you do have a will, it's possible there's some things you could still learn, and it's a living document. So you can always update it, change it, and help your generations. As well, we're going to have a free summit. So everybody who goes to joewelch.com is going to get a free ticket automatically to the summit. And you'll be able to pop into our Facebook community and learn more and watch the summit there. And at its core, all of that is going to be always priming you to start thinking about the will. You are writing things down. Just thinking about them, definitely a good step. But I recommend that people do get some sort of journal or something that you're writing it down in a safe place, that if you don't need to put down personal information online, or, really, really take that time. And so what I'm doing is I'm also working on a workbook that's a physical manifestation. You would print it, have it. And then I'm partnering for the summit. I am working with someone who does end of life celebrations. And so a lot of these folks have their own journals as well. And so we're just cross promoting to make sure that people get choice. So the No Excuses book is going to be in tandem with the No Excuses Summit. At the end of that free day, you're going to be able to say, especially then, like, oh, right, and get some things taken care of, have met some other people that might be those extensions of trust. I'm looking right now for speakers on life insurance. And again, just a little exposure to start getting us thinking about it. The end of life celebration, I also have an approach where we do it while people are still alive. I've done it while people have been very sick, and bringing communities together. And so really reframing it to a living document, to celebrating now. I know I'm a sign language interpreter and Latina, so this computer is having so much fun with my gestures. I don't think I've gotten the balloons for you guys yet. Let's see if I can get balloons.
There we go. Good job.
And you know what? I'm celebrating the upcoming summit, and everybody's invited for free. Everybody has a ticket. And then my VIPs, especially those who want to take it the next step, we're going to have a second day that is only for VIPs. And we're going to go through, and you're going to get some foundational stuff done for your will, so that whatever your decision is, whether you want to continue down my road, if you have an attorney, we will have gone through step by step so that you have a finished, like, not a finished product. I am not an attorney. You will have foundational pieces and feel like you are the one driving this conversation. And no matter what, no matter how, no matter who is the person who gets that final stamp on there to notarize and gets you there, it is all the same mission. Get a blueprint there so that your family knows where you're going next and be able to live in that celebration. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
See, this funny thing is that this is the balloons, but live in that celebration.
So the other part is I'm going to add to it is it's really important that all of this get done and you write out what you want and who you want to be having all of this. But here's the other key point of it all as well. Make sure that one person at least knows where you keep that document.
Absolutely.
Keep it in the
Do not put it in a safe deposit box, because that also has its own challenges. Find a fireproof box. Make sure that people have copies. I'm just echoing what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not a secret.
No, it's something that everybody needs to have, but make sure that the right people are involved in it to share it so that they don't have at the end of it of this whole grief of never mind have they've lost you, but on top of it, now they're in the search mode because they don't know where anything's are.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are estranged and you're not sure how to handle the discord that comes with that, there will be a story about doing an obituary that tells the truth. And so, as you know, where there's a lot of love and people will be missed, we are right now, I'm actively working with someone about how do we create an obituary that says that this person wasn't a good person. And that, you know, here is like they had a life. And while protocol might encourage you, maybe, what is it? Who was the etiquette writer? Miss Manners, right? Miss Manners might say, like, if you have nothing good to say, don't say it. But some people need to live their truth. And this world is different. We see in our younger generation a desire for and a working towards consent, transparency, honesty, you know. And so whoever you are and however you need to see it happen, there's a way to do it, from a standard end of life where you're, you know, with a funeral home and you're buried in a plot with, you know, with your family, to being buried at the bottom of a tree where you become a tree, or a coral reef, or a diamond, or there's so many ways. It's your life.
Yeah,
you can
that's
live it.
And you know, one of the things you mentioned that I really, really love is the celebration of life while someone's still alive. And I've seen some videos on that, you know, knowing that someone is terminally ill and throwing them a party and letting them relive their best moments. And my daughter, a couple months ago, she says, Mom, she goes, I'm sending you something. I want you to fill it out for me. And it was 7 things. She had like 7 questions she asked me. It says 7 questions to ask your mom before she dies. And so I got on Canva.
Will you send that to me? Will you send that to me?
Yeah, I'll find it. Yes. And I got on Canva and I just made this little booklet for her. And it was like, you know, what is your best memory of us? Or, you know, how did you feel when I was first born? Things like that. So I did it. And one of the things, what do you want to be remembered for? And for me, it's that person that hops in the car at a moment's notice and just takes off with their kid, you know. So I put some pictures in there of our travels. You know, it took me, you know, half an hour maybe, but that's going to be so important for her at some point that she remembers that. And it's important for me, for her to have that knowledge of her mom.
Absolutely. I want to just share 2 quick stories. I had one friend who was, you know, he had cancer, we already knew. And so with being invited in by the friends and family, we created, and what I do is I do this through Facebook groups. And so you can make it private, you can make it public. You just have to have someone who's in charge of it. And that's what I do. And we were able to bring up to about 700 people in. And as he was transitioning, he'd had it on and they were just reading all the remarks and people were coming in and out. He was deaf, so it was all through sign language and just communicating these memories. And so he was able to pass knowing the impact he made on this life. And then how this really amped up for me was because of my friend Tony, who went into a coma for 31 days. And when it was in the middle of a pandemic, everyone was stuck in place. And all of a sudden, 2 things happened. One, I built this community and we had, again, 700 people. Seems like a sweet spot. 700 people, and everyone was posting love and prayers and pictures and stories and laughing. And so that was my rule. Had to be positive, had to be supportive. I was the only voice until I got a connection to the family or a friend who would give me information. And it was going to only be one stream of information. And that was going to be it. We weren't going to challenge people. We weren't going to go crazy on the family who also needed their time while this was going on. And we were able to create this, and lo and behold, Tony woke up. And then his recovery was watching 700 people love him for 31 days. It was amazing.
That's
He
incredible.
absolutely attributes his success to seeing how much the prayer and the spirit and what people were bringing and the impact he had on his life. You know, he's a young guy. He's 53. He's doing great. Back to work. Everything is good, but it was crazy. The other side of that coin was that I did see firsthand how difficult it was. He didn't have a will. He didn't have a power of attorney. He had an older son who came in trying to be responsible, but they weren't close. He had best friends who lived in the area. He had a mom and a brother in another state. Like all of those things was this perfect storm of who gets the right to talk about this and who really should be speaking on his behalf. And it got messy, it got sticky, it was emotional. And fortunately this one ended with, he came back and everything has been rectified. He has his will and all his paperwork. But the reality is that you can have the wrong person in that room.
It's true.
Yeah.
And legally you have nothing to say. Those partners out there who don't have a marriage certificate or who are living even a platonic roommate, but someone who's their best friend and they would want that person to represent them. It might be a parent or a sibling or someone, whoever that is, depending on your state and the law. So there are a lot of things that we don't think about. This is not about, do you have $1 million? This is about the people that will be left behind. Is it that you want, this is the piece we haven't talked about. Do you want them to spend their life undoing and trying to discover yours? It costs money. If your time is worth $100 an hour, $200 an hour, if you make your bread to bring home to your family, and now you are sidetracked by doing this whole other job, right? 20, 30, 40 hours a week to try to rectify someone's estate. Those are thousands and thousands of labor hours, dollars that don't have to exist in real life. They exist in somebody is putting that effort into something else.
I get it. Yeah.
And if you don't have an estate to fund it, that's paying for that time, that you're doing that all out of pocket, you could be doing it for a estranged family. It could be doing it for someone you love, but it could go on for years. And maybe somebody needs the life insurance and maybe somebody, you know what I mean? Like there's so many components to a life that we don't even know. And so that's my job. It's about the blueprint. And we are going to work on that blueprint and get you the experts, which always why we're going to have attorneys. We're going to have life insurance people who are certified, financial advisors who are certified. And we're going to have a fun conversation and think about all the great ways that this legacy has been built and that you're able to leave it to somebody else.
I love it. Well, Joe, it's sad to say that we've come to close to the end of our show. And you have just been a wealth of information. And before we finish, and I appreciate this far more than you even realize, because I look at what I've gone through in my life from people not being properly prepared. So I'm very much there with total support for what you're doing. And
thank you so much. Glenda, I would love to reach out to both of you offline. I want to hear your will stories because right now I'm literally writing the book of tips and stories so that people can learn from them. That's the value of this, is like, oh my God, did I go through something to live on it with me, to live in me and not tell anybody? No, That's literally the antithesis of what we're doing. We are living our experiences to make sure that somebody else who reads it, who hears it, says, oh my gosh, you mean I can skip all that pain? Yeah. You can skip all that pain and learn from somebody else. So I hope you guys welcome me to that. And also anybody out there, if you've got an amazing story, I definitely want to hear it. I'm including it in the writing now. Just go to joewelch.com. That's going to bring you into my world, into my ecosystem. And then from there, you'll learn all the fun things, including why I doll up. I'm actually in Encanto. So I did the Lion King, to go to the fun part. The Lion King, I was Scar. I was Ursula for Little Mermaid, and now we're doing Encanto, and I get to play Mirabel. So I have my curls going. I'm gonna have. I'm Colombian, and she's Colombian, so I'm gonna have my white flowery top. And so again, it's about the amazing life that we lead.
And for those who don't know, let me interrupt for a second. That Joe sings like an angel.
Mm-hmm. True.
Absolutely, Angel. So if you haven't heard her, this is why she is all of these people all tied up into one. She is an absolute
you.
angel.
I do karaoke online. Like, let's have some fun together. No matter where you are in your life, there's always a reason to ask Joe. So come join me, find me, joewelch.com. Whatever it is, I'm sure we'll figure it out. And I thank you because right now we're at that point where there are no excuses. Let's live our life.
Nicole, can you give us last words of wisdom here?
Well, I so agree with her about everything. And, you know, I don't want to have had my daughters have this nice, easy life. And then all of a sudden mom slams them, you know, with some stuff that they're not expecting. They don't know what to do. And, you know, what would mom do? Well, guess what? Mom's gone. But I want to leave them with a legacy of love. And just like you talk about I want them to know where my writings are. I want them to know maybe where my jewelry is, because there's one maybe I want for one daughter and one for another. And so I think the easiest thing to do, we all know the minute we're born, we start dying, and it's just a fact, and it could happen tomorrow. I could go lay down on the couch and not wake up. We just don't know. So I think it's so important not just to show love to yourself, show it for your family, how much you love them, and let them walk that path a little easier. I so appreciate my mom's knowledge and how she did it for me. And I'm not going to say it made it simple, because it's never simple when you're going to your mom's house and she's not there. It is no fun at all. But what she did left a legacy for me of that's how I'm going to do it for my daughters. So, Joe is your go-to. Joe is your gal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those who do have any questions, or even if you're thinking about it, it's really important to stop thinking and start doing. It's the action step that matters. And here's another little point of interest I want you to start thinking about. The first time you write a will is the first time when you actually have some type of assets in your name. You don't have to be 60 or 70 or 80 or 90. When you have a family and you have something to leave, you should be starting at the beginning. Wills are very simple to actually bring up to date. Do codicils, which means adding an addition to a will. It's as simple as writing one single document that can be added to your will. It doesn't mean that you have to start it all over again. But the idea is, if you have anything in your name, is to make sure you have safeguarded it by giving it a proper document that it sets it forth that somebody else shall be getting it if you aren't around. Joe, one last little remark.
One last thing, I want to make an addendum to that at 18 years old, you are an adult, and there aren't people who you're not under somebody else's care. Get your first will at 18. It's simple. It couldn't be simpler at that moment. And then that thing will exist when you go to college or you move away. Who's the one making those decisions? Don't worry. The asset piece is very critical, but it may not be immediate in your life, but you are. It is about you. It is about how do you want to leave this earth, and how do you want the people around you to find your situation? How are they going to find the information that they need? Because it's going to happen. Here's my example for this. I knew that this time would come that we have to close out this show. But instead of looking at every single minute as though it's almost at its end, I enjoyed every single minute with all my heart. So this is what we're doing with our life. Enjoy every single minute. At 18, write your first will. At 25, rewrite that will. At 26, rewrite it because now you have a new business and a child. Rewrite it again at 30. It is a living document. It is able to be redone over and over and over again as you grow. I welcome you, and I invite you to reach out. My name is Joe Welch. You can find me at joewelch.com.
Thank you all. And thank you for joining us. And remember, please share this around. People need to hear about it. No more excuses. Finish your will now. Thank you.